This is a picture of me in 1985. In 1986 and 1987, our 9 to 10-year-old next-door neighbors in a suburban neighborhood on the west side of the Minnesota metropolitan area would come over and do something they referred to as Naked City. They would prick their finger on the light switch before practicing sex acts in our living room. They were soon caught and thrown out of our house, and my mother disconnected all the light switches and installed something called a clapper, where we would instead clap our hands to turn the lights off and on. I recall one evening my father was having an argument in our kitchen with our mother, whom was accusing him of cheating on her. Upset that this wasn't okay with her, he suddenly threw a full porcelain cup of coffee at her head as hard as he could. It exploded right next to her face. Upset, I responded by picking up a nearby baseball bat and hitting him square in the face with it, giving him a bloody nose and allowing time for her to escape. We then got into the car in the driveway, at which point he threw an unopened can of soup at the driver's side windshield, causing it to shatter, but we still got away. These arguments were kind of typical, and our upper middle class neighbors would frequently intervene when the police showed up at a domestic disturbance call, telling them that my mom was crazy and taking our father's side. Because of the arguments, I spent several days at battered women's shelters in downtown Minneapolis. Returning, our neighbors continued to harass us everywhere we went, offering us a good job and a new car if our family joined them. One day we placed a large stack of Forbes magazines in our driveway, doused them in gasoline, and set them on fire. My mom would give me crates of eggs to egg the neighborhood, and upon going to the grocery store, the entire parking lot and customers inside the store would harass us, sometimes indirectly, other times directly, saying that we would always be poor and never amount to anything. I was instructed to give them the middle finger and call them a bunch of truckers. So, in 1988, we moved to another suburb, and we were immediately stalked just shortly after moving in, again by the community at large. There my education was severely neglected. I was placed in the back of the classroom, unable to hear or see what the teacher was teaching. When I would catch the bus, it would deliberately change routes and drop me off several miles from home, at which point I would have to walk. My mom bought me a bike, but it was stolen the next day out of the garage that we had put it in. Finally, fed up with this, my mom decided to finalize the separation from our father and got custody. We moved to the middle of nowhere in northern Minnesota. Put in school later in the year, I was taught how to read and write in under a half hour and was put on the front page of the newspaper with the column reading that my education had been severely neglected at the previous school, but I caught on to the material quite quickly here. We thought to stay there when we began to be stalked again, so we moved to a town some 20 miles northeast, where upon moving in we began to be stalked again. So we moved again, this being the third time in under a year. Again, shortly upon arrival we were stalked, but this time we stayed for a year. I did well in school, being in the paper again for test scores, and it was suggested that I be skipped to the 6th grade, but my mother thought I should wait and declined the offer. We frequently had run-ins with gangs throughout the community. For example, when 4 teenagers attacked my little sister while she was alone on a trail, ripping half her clothes off and destroying her bike. I saw it happening from a distance, and as they left, waited for them to go near a cliff, at which point I threw one of them and his bike off of it, breaking his leg. The sheriff's department showed up and went to the neighborhood where their parents lived, and they expressed extreme dissatisfaction that I wasn't in trouble. There were about 5 to 6 homes in a row about 6 blocks from where we lived. I stood in the distance as all of them stood in their front yards shouting at me, at which point more squads showed up and blocked off the street. Stuff like this was a common occurrence, at which point my grandfather suggested I own a gun, but my mother again thought this would be a bad idea. By early 1992, we moved again, this time about 30 miles south of where we were, to a larger town. Much to my surprise, we weren't stalked here, and I did well enough in school to be asked to skip from the 5th to the 10th grade. However, they wanted me to attend a private school specifically for the gifted that only existed within the metropolitan area, so my mother again declined. Unfortunately, one night the police showed up and said our mother had been in a car accident and was in critical condition. She had been at the bar and had crossed the center line of the highway, hitting another vehicle head-on. This was only the first time I had heard of her drinking alcohol since we moved from the city some 5 years earlier, and, according to a lawsuit, she had told the bartender that she'd been drinking and wanted a taxi, but he continually neglected to call one for her, so she eventually attempted to drive home. Because of her time in the hospital, we were forced to move again, this time because we had fallen behind on bills. Due to her inability now to work, we had to move back to the metropolitan area where our father would aid in caring for us. Unfortunately, we ended up back in the same suburb where we were to begin with, and the memories hadn't faded from our minds, so we were very suspicious of the community as a whole. Due to a positive review from my English teacher, I was asked to find a publishing company and became a professional author. I was asked to find a publishing company and become a professional author. I had been interested in cyberpunk, also known as hacker culture, for some time and decided I wanted to write about that, as pretty much nobody knew what the internet was at the time. Because I had received a good referral from my previous schools, I stopped attending and decided to be homeschooled, which soon after caused my sisters to want it as well. Not surprisingly, they refused to do any schoolwork, and with our mother incapacitated, she lost custody and my sisters were forced into foster care, while I was given the opportunity to stay or move in with my father. Since our phone was disconnected with an expensive bill and I needed to get online, I chose to move in with my father. My computer, which had been purchased by my father for $50 the year before, was all that I owned while I slept in the dining room of his apartment. After some time out of school, the county offered to let me enroll in school for socialization, which I did sporadically, often showing off to new friends the things I was capable of doing online. Eventually, white-collar criminals and organized crime were asking me to do things like hack the IRS, which I didn't want to do, but didn't want to tell them that. So because they kept asking me, the only thing I could do was stop deleting my tracks, which after a little over a month resulted in my arrest.